Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, as we start to prepare for the Pittsburgh Steelers, turn the page to the Week 3 opponent for the Silver and Black. The team has made an addition to their practice squad. Could they possibly be in the market for another running back? That plus a whole lot more comes up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for Wednesday, September 20th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, man, thank you. Really, it's because of you, Raider Nation, that the show has grown in such a major way. We're almost up to 9,000 subscriptions on the YouTube page already. So many thanks to you, Raider Nation. Without you, of course, it's not there. Also, without my guy, Ari, it's not there either, right? Ari makes sure we do a great job, or he does a great job making sure we're up on YouTube each and every day looking good and sounding good, so I definitely appreciate him. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can always hit me up on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And you know we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. And off top, man, I really want to thank everybody for reaching out and sharing the kind words for my son's birthday that passed on Tuesday, September 19th. He would have been 24, but passed away in a car accident in 2020, in January 2020, 4 days before Kobe Bryant passed away in that helicopter accident. So really wild because, that was his favorite basketball player. And so just to see him pass away just a couple days after my son, that was really just nuts and unbelievable. And I was in Miami when it happened, preparing for the Super Bowl, right? It was the Chiefs and the 49ers, and just was not myself that week for obvious reasons. But, man, really, thank you so much for all the kind words. It was awesome. Me and the family definitely appreciate that. And I know my son Kimani up there in heaven watching down on us and is rocking with me each and every day. I know he appreciated it as well. So thank you, Raider Nation, for that. It's much appreciated. Coming up in segment number 3 of the show, like I said, calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get as many of those in as possible because there was a ton of them, but we'll get as many in as possible in segment number 3. Segment number 2, had a really good conversation with the great Lincoln Kennedy. He was in the booth there in Buffalo side by side with Jason Horowitz, the voice of the Silver and Black. Had a good conversation with him on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Tuesday, really talking about what the Raiders can learn and what they can clean up and, what they have to do to prepare themselves for the upcoming game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a really good defense that they're bringing to town. Sunday Night Football, primetime action, Allegiant Stadium. So you hear that conversation with Lincoln coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, I'd like to hit you with the news and notes of the day. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. The Raiders made a roster move as far as the practice squad goes. They signed linebacker Michael Walker to the practice squad. He was a former 4th-round pick in 2020 of the Falcons, and he was there till 2022. In the offseason, he was with the Bears this past offseason, and now he's currently on the Raiders practice squad. But, man, for a guy that hasn't been in the league very long, he's actually got some really good production. He's pretty intriguing to me. I don't know a whole lot about him. Not going to act like I do and not try to blow smoke up your backside, but 187 total tackles, 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 3 interceptions, and a pass defense and a defensive touchdown. He's only been in the league since 2020, right? And a 4th-round pick of the Falcons. So, again, not a whole lot of time in the league, but he's got some pretty good production. So I'm pretty intrigued by what Michael Walker could bring to the table. And he's a linebacker on the practice squad right now for the Silver and Black. Is he a guy that they could see elevating to the active roster? Maybe they're not getting what they want out of certain guys that are on the current 53-man roster. That's going to be interesting to see what kind of moves they make as well. Also, my guy Jordan Schultz from The Source, he does a really good job, been around the NFL and the NBA for a very long time. He's an NFL insider, shot me the text and put it out there on Twitter on Tuesday about several teams have checked in with the Rams about a potential Cam Akers trade, including the Buccaneers, Ravens, Raiders, and the Browns, amongst others. And he said it's still possible Akers gets released because of salary reasons, but the team is actively shopping him, and he's more than likely played his last game there. Akers had 3 consecutive 100-yard rushing games with 3 touchdowns to close out last season. Now, I don't think that there's anything too the Raiders making a trade for Cam Akers at all. I just don't see that. But I can see the Raiders reaching out to the Rams and just kind of, gauging the interest, or even just kind of getting some information, like fact-finding when it comes to running back Cam Akers. And, look, I say it all the time. It's always sexier when the Raiders' name is involved in anything. But I know Jordan Schultz really well. He's a good friend of mine, and so I know he doesn't just throw stuff out there and hope it sticks against the wall. Vinny Bonsignore doubled down. He's obviously a good friend as well and a colleague. He tweeted out the Raiders are not looking to trade for a running back. And the key word right there is trade. So I'll definitely continue to pay attention to that. I don't think that Dave Ziegler and Champ Kelly were just kicking the tires just to kick the tires. I'm sure that there's some kind of interest. Cam Akers is a very talented dude who, going into this training camp and preseason, thought that he was in good graces again with Sean McVay, but it seems like he fell out of good graces real quick, fast, and hurry. So most likely they'll probably release him, and we'll see who goes and makes a move for him. But at least it looks like the Raiders are doing their job, which is just due diligence and finding about Cam Akers. Wanted to bring this sound to you. I like to bring these Brian Baldy's breakdowns. I like to bring them to the table. Most of the time when I'm doing it, it's about Max Crosby, and it's really positive, right? There was one time after that Cowboys preseason game, it was about Tyree Wilson, and he was pretty impressed. Well, let me tell you, the last few Baldy breakdowns that I saw that had to do with Tyree Wilson, he wasn't very impressed. And now remember, he's doing video breakdowns, so you're not going to be able to understand this sound 100%. But you could understand when I say that Baldy's not too happy with Tyree Wilson. So in this little soundbite, it's about 30 seconds long, he's talking about two edge rushers. Remember, the first one is rookie Tyree Wilson. The second one is 98, Mad Max Crosby. Check it out.
Watch two guys on the Raiders. Let's just watch this guy over here rush the passer here. Like Josh Allen is running. Let's just see what this guy's doing over here. Like Deion Dawkins has got his end blocked 30 yards away from the quarterback. Then let's watch this end over here. Let's watch this guy, 98, go. Like, that's how you play the game. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. Like, what in the world is going on?
So as you can tell, Baldy's not too happy, right? He was pretty fired up by Tyree Wilson in the preseason, but so far through 2 games, he's not too thrilled by what he's seeing from Tyree Wilson, and the fact that Deion Dawkins, the Bills' offensive lineman, had him so far out there on the island while he was trying to block him. He had him locked up, and he couldn't get off the block. He just couldn't get off the block. And I'm a guy who was in support of Tyree Wilson. I'm still in support of Tyree Wilson. When the Raiders made that draft pick, I think he's going to be a good player. But sooner rather than later, man, he's got to start to show something, right? It's been 2 games. I understand he's coming off an injury. I get it. But, it's at some point you got to put up or shut up, right? So I don't know how long it's going to take him to get into a groove and a rhythm and understand what he's trying to do. But so far, as you can tell by Baldy, not too impressed with what he's seeing for the rookie out of Texas Tech. I also wanted you to hear what Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football and NFL Network had to say, and this is something that caught my attention on Tuesday. One, I saw it on the show, and then I saw the audio on Twitter, so I thought, oh, I got to have it. And he was talking about the weapons that the Steelers have. Now, the Steelers are 1-1 on the season. They picked up that victory on Monday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns, and offensively they weren't impressive, but they did score 2 defensive touchdowns, so we know they can get it done defensively. But they do have weapons offensively. They just haven't got things going right now. So Kyle Brandt here is actually going to point out the weapons, and really one of them is a running back that's sitting behind Najee Harris that when you hear this sound, you'll understand Kyle Brandt probably thinks he shouldn't be sitting behind Najee anymore. Check it out. Here's Kyle Brandt talking about the weapons that the Steelers have.
They have a lot of good players on offense. They got 2 guys who pop, and I mean, you watch them, you're like, oh, that guy's a guy. It's George Pickens, obviously, and they got him involved. It took a while, though. Why can't they do the thing with him where you see with other receivers where they're getting him touches early?
Right away.
I have to shout out our guy John Hine from the Howard Stern Show, who's a huge Steelers fan. He's tweeting, he's like, is George Pickens alive? Is he in this game? And then they throw it to him, and it's just a lightning strike. That is different from anybody else in the huddle. You got to get Pickens more involved, especially if you're suspicious that he might tune out psychologically a little bit, which is to be determined, but he didn't look that thrilled during the Niners game. The second thing is a little bit more iffy. The other guy who pops in the huddle is Jaylen Warren. And the problem is he's not often in the huddle. Jaylen Warren is an undrafted guy, and he's playing behind a guy, Najee Harris, who is very highly drafted. We've seen enough at this point. Najee is a little bit of a plotter. He's a burst. He's an angry runner. We love all that stuff. This guy has juice every time he gets in the game. You're like, well, who is that? And there's a long history of backup guys who are late drafted, who clearly have more burst than the high draft pick guy in front of them. I don't even need to list them. If you watch football, you know. I would really like to see Jaylen Warren on the field a lot more, or maybe first. and second because I feel like they move the ball totally differently when he's in. And at this point, it's an ugly 1-1, and they're lucky to be 1-1. Their defense saved them. Yeah. I would like a lot more touches for Jalen Warren and some early touches for George Pickens, and I think he can do that.
So there you go, Kyle Brandt from NFL Network talking about couple weapons on the Steelers offense that the Raiders are definitely going to have to pay attention to. George Pickens, he's a household name, right? He's a very good up-and-coming wide receiver. I think he's going to be really good. He's still trying to sharpen his tools, but, man, he can get it done. And especially if he gets involved in the offense early, as you heard Kyle Brandt point out right there, that's a good way to keep him involved and locked in. And, man, he could be a menace all day long, and that'll really help Kenny Pickett out in a long way. But you heard him talking about the running back, Jalen Warren. Right, he's behind Najee Harris. Najee Harris is a guy that really, I mean, you know, he's a tough runner, right? He's a 3-down back. He's that guy's going to get you 3, 4, 5, 6 yards, right? He's that tough guy. But Warren got that juice, that burst, that boom, that home run ability. That's what you got to watch out for as well. So a couple weapons right there I thought was a really good little description and breakdown from Kyle Brandt. Good Morning Football on NFL Network. Later on this morning at the Intermountain Health Performance Center, Coach McDaniels will be talking to the media. I won't be able to be there. I've got a meeting at 11 o'clock, so I won't be able to be there. But 11 a.m. Pacific time, he'll be meeting with the media. Then practice is open from 12:45 to 1:15. And then open locker room, and Jimmy G and Devontae Adams will be at the podium talking to the media between 2:45 and 3:30. And as I mentioned, open locker room as well. So there you go. Coach McDaniels at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 12:45 to 1:15. Practice is open to the media. And then 2:45 to 3:30, that's when you'll hear from Jimmy Garoppolo, wide receiver Devontae Adams. And then the locker room is open. So I won't be able to be there. As I said, I got a meeting at the radio station. So, you know, just that's one of those that I'm just going to have to miss. And that's how it happens. Oh, and by the way, I got to do a radio show at 2 o'clock. So clearly won't be able to make that either. But just want to give you an update on when different guys are going to be speaking for the Silver and Black as they're turning the page to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Coming up in segment number 2, you'll hear the conversation I had on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness Tuesday with the great Lincoln Kennedy, color analyst for the Raiders Radio Network alongside Jason Horowitz. That was a really good conversation. You'll hear it coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about our partners at eBay Motors. They've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Doesn't matter if you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire. Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So this week, let's check out who Vinny's picked out in eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. He's got, let's see, Chiefs second-year running back Isaiah Pacheco, Ravens rookie wide receiver Zay Flowers, Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown. Let's take a look at Zay Flowers. He says, Ravens rookie wide receiver Zay Flowers had a fine debut in Week 1 before a more modest Week 2, but Flowers will go into full bloom while cruising to a big game on a weak Colts secondary at home in Week 3. Flowers will be schemed open well as Baltimore's new-look passing game continues to find more life with Lamar Jackson. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you with your fantasy championship. eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smooth. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, you're not burning cash. If you have any kind of need, no matter what it is, for your car, for your vehicle, for your baby, whatever you call it, eBay's got you covered. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into the conversation I had on Tuesday on Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920 with great Lincoln Kennedy, man. He's fantastic, great breakdowns. Love what he does in the booth side by side with Jason Horowitz. And we really started to turn the page from the Bills to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, we'll talk about some elements of the game, but we'll also talk about how the Raiders can improve, right? What they can clean up on as they prepare for the Pittsburgh Steelers. As a matter of fact, that's how we started the whole conversation on Tuesday. Here it is, myself and Lincoln Kennedy from Tuesday on Raider Nation Radio 920. What do you think that the Raiders need to really work on the most this week to kind of clean up in preparation for Pittsburgh?
Developing the ability to run out of one back in a spread formation. So whatever you have to do is bring in a receiver to help out with the safety or extra man in the box. Know this. Every team in the National Football League is going to recognize that number 8 was last year's NFL rushing champion. And you've seen the first two games, that those two teams are saying, you know what, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us through the air. You're not going to beat us by running the football or being balanced.
What have you seen from the offensive line? I mean, the very first play of the game, Greg Van Roten is in Josh Jacobs' lap because of Ed Oliver. What have you seen just from the offensive line in general?
One thing, they're playing too high. I've never had a liking to guards going from a 2-point stance. The guys that you're playing over with are usually defensive tackles, bowling balls, as I like to call them. They're lower, so they're naturally lower. The reason why Van Roten got carried to the backfield and got Josh Jacobs that 4-yard loss on the first play of the game was because he was too high. He's already a tall man. You go out a 2-point stance. If you're not coming off the ball, firing off the ball, you're being fired upon, and that's what happened to most of the guards in this game by the defensive tackles of the Bills.
So is that the struggles, in your opinion, for the run game, or is it a combination of Josh Jacobs is just not hitting the timing with the offensive line yet either?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the best way to summarize it. I'm not going to put it on one area. The fact that you don't have a solid blocking tight end means that you can't run stretch plays or get to the outside. Okay? The fact is, if your guards are playing soft or getting pushed in the backfield, you don't have holes that you can open up between the tackles. So where else are you going to run?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? When they brought in Zamir White in the fourth quarter before he fumbled, they were running the same plays they tried to give to Josh Jacobs. Why was it working this time? Because the Buffalo Bills weren't caring about number 35. They were worried about number 8.
Right.
And so that's what's going to happen from here on out. Look, Josh Jacobs is definitely a capable running back. We've seen that. We know that. This team is very capable. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to scheme for the fact that they're going to bring an extra man in the box every time they see Jakob Johnson and Mullen and on the line. You know what I mean? And the thing is you're not going to throw to Thayer Mumford. You're not going to throw to your offensive tackle or your running back. You don't really show signs of. So why should we pay attention to play action?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Lincoln Kennedy's with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920. And, Lincoln, one of the things I keep saying is that this offense is built to be balanced, but with no run game, it can't be balanced. And especially with Jimmy G, he's not going to throw the ball around the yard 40 times and just win you the game like that. How critical is it to get that running game going?
Well, it is critical because it allows balance. A running game is a quarterback's best friend, and there's a number of reasons why. Because not only will it soften the box, if you are able to run the football, it'll make it easier for you to throw balls over the back of the defense or maybe get one beyond the safety, so take some deep strikes. But it also opens up play action. When you're able to run the ball, the defense becomes sucked into all the action in the backfield, which allows you to open up lanes right behind that linebackers and down between those safeties. One thing sets up the other. That's why it's incredibly important to have balance.
What about Jakobi Meyers? He wasn't there because of a concussion, and Hunter Renfrow didn't get a target till late in the game. How much was that Raiders offense missing Jakobi?
I would think it's a lot, mainly because Jakobi Meyers knows this offense, the route running tree and everything else. Not to say that Devontae or other guys don't, but here's the thing I've always said: it takes timing, it takes working with one another, full speed. I think the reason, in my opinion, why Garoppolo and Meyers had such a connection in the first game is because they're both familiar with the style of offense. So one can depend on the other to be where they're supposed to be at the right time. This takes time with other guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing is that we haven't seen a consistent part of it, even when they try to open up the passing game, to these weapons. As you mentioned, Hunter Renfrow was targeted late in the game. Hooper got a couple of catches, stuff like that, but it wasn't enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it really wasn't. And it seems like 2 weeks now in a row, it's been really, Devontae and Jakobi week 1, Devontae and Josh Jacobs in the passing game week 2, and that's it. It's not being spread around. How much does Jimmy G got to get comfortable with the rest of these guys and spread that ball around?
Well, I think that's what comes with just playing with one another. You know what I mean? The thing is that most coaches out there in the NFL, because they don't play their starters in preseason, want to use the first month of the season to get everybody kind of in order. But when you're running a gauntlet like the Raiders have, when you talk about the first 4 games, you don't want to start out 0-4. That's not going to happen. But you sure the hell don't want to finish the month with 1-3. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially in this division where you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. So you got to find a way to create some balance. You got to find a way to create some opportunities for other receivers to get involved in the offense, and more importantly, make them known viable threats. It's one of those things where if you put it on film for defenses, they'll have another thing to prepare for.
The great Lincoln Kennedy joins us here on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness. So when your team gets punched in the mouth like the Bills did to the Raiders on Sunday, how does the team respond? How does the Raiders, how do they take that, learn from it, throw it away, and then come back this week?
Q, it's so early in the season, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know what we're going to see. That ultimately is a problem. If you're going to take the first month to truly evaluate where you are as a team, where you are as a coaching staff, then you're going to take your Willie lumps. And we're talking about a team in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills, who many have projected to be in the Super Bowl. So that's your standard. You get throttled by one of those, well, then you obviously know that you're not there yet. Yeah, sure, you beat the Broncos. What is that? Is that really a feather in your hat? No. Right. The Broncos haven't really beaten anybody. So, you really have to see how this goes, especially this next coming game against Pittsburgh. If you watch anything of that Monday night game, you saw how their defense swarms around, how much a threat, Watt is and all these other things that you have to prepare for. If you're not ready, you're going to get hit in them out just like Cleveland did.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, that Steelers defense is no joke, right? They make plays, they score points, they score touchdowns, right? So they're a really good defense. How about the defense for the Raiders? Patrick Graham was in the booth now instead of on the sideline. How much does that change what he's able to see as a defensive play caller?
Well, you get to see more of the all-22, and you get a little bit more of a better insight into what teams are doing as far as formation-wise when you're up high rather than being on the sideline. But I will say this about the defense. They held on for as long as they could as much as they could for as long as they could. They eventually wore out in the second half because they were always in the field. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, it comes down to this. Max Crosby needs help.
Yeah.
It's not like Spillane needs help. It's not, you know what I'm saying? The thing is, Q, is that other guys are going to have to stand up. If you took anything from last night, you saw the focus that Cleveland had on T.J. Watt, but they had other guys that were making plays. Hightower's making plays on the back end, with sacks and stuff like that. Their defensive tackles were getting pushed. You're going to have to get more production out of your general defensive line altogether, aside from number 98.
Right. Buffalo decided he wasn't going to wreck the game, and nobody else stepped up, right? And Tyree Wilson is young. We all talked about him and his development. There was no push from the interior. Somebody, Lincoln's got to step up, and I don't know who that guy could potentially be.
Well, I'm right there with you, but they've got to find somebody. And more importantly, it's got to come from the guys that are in that locker room. Coaches can only do so much. Coaches coach, but players play. So if you want to take over a football game like you saw the defensive tackles of the Bills did, their interior guys, then take it over. What's to stop you? But you go out there and do it. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where I'm hoping for the benefit of this defense that it can stand up and be counted, because the fact that they got exposed as much as they got exposed in the second half was sad because the offense couldn't pull their weight.
What have you seen so far from the rookie Jacorian Bennett?
He's raw, but again, he needs reps against premier talent. Mm-hmm. And for example, that receiving core they played in Buffalo is one of the premier cores in the National Football League.
Yeah.
With Davis and Diggs and so on, and their tight end Kincaid, they've got everything there. So, when you talk about the youngsters standing up and being playing, I want to see somebody make an impact like Nate Hobbs did when he first came in.
Yeah.
His first year.
Yeah.
He played with a fire in his belly because he felt that he was rejected by dropping so far in the draft. I want to see that type of play out of these young guys.
Yeah, no, that's what they need. They need someone to make a play. And Lincoln, we've talked about sacks and interceptions and turnovers, and so far no turnovers, right? They haven't created any through 2 weeks. I know they had a couple called back because of penalties, but at the end of the day, they've got to find a way to get their hands on some balls.
Well, that's it. You also got to find who's that fire starter. Other than Max Crosby, when a team wants to take out one player, you saw it time and time again. You saw what they tried to do with, T.J. Watt last night. You saw what they did with Max Crosby in Buffalo. That's what's going to happen. They're not going to be just like when they see number 8 in the backfield, and you've got your next tackle, Thayer Munford, as your tight end, and your Jakob Johnson is your fullback. Teams know we're going to load the box because we know you're not going to throw the ball, or you're less likely to throw the ball.
What about the speed of Trey Tucker, what he brought to the table on the one end around that he had?
That was the first time, and I said this on the air, that I saw a jet sweep work. Mm-hmm. And when I went back and looked at the replay, the reason why it worked is, unlike any other time, all the defenders' eyes, other than the man who was in motion with Tucker when he started, everybody was looking at Jacobs in the backfield.
Yeah, that's what
everybody was paying attention to Jacobs. So when he got the jet sweep, you didn't see that defensive end come upfield. You saw him crash down on the inside, as well as a person, I think was a safety or a corner that was outside of him.
Well, now it's on film, so now they're going to be paying attention to it, right? Now they're going to.
Well, that's what you give, but at the same point, you got to figure out a way to create some action off of that to where you can fool people. Mm-hmm. Just know this: when anybody sees number 8 in the backfield, they are going to focus on him.
Right. No, I know that's right, especially after the season he had last year. And there's got to be a way that the Raiders find a way to get him going. I mean, without him, without the success of the run game, Lincoln, I just don't see this offense scoring more than 17, 18 points a game.
Well, I see them having trouble doing that.
Right.
I mean, look, Devontae Adams is a tremendous talent, but there are going to be teams that are going to bracket him as well. Take him out of the equation. So then Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to be near perfect with his throws or creative with how they find ways to get him open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sooner or later, defenses are going to focus on that because they're looking for number 17. They're looking for number 8. Why? Because those were the two biggest playmakers for the Raiders one season ago.
There was the conversation I had on Tuesday with Lincoln Kennedy, and we're blessed. We get to have Lincoln on the show each Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, we kind of look back at the last game, and on Thursday, we look forward. But after that, that letdown and that embarrassment that the Raiders had on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills, didn't want to harp too much on that game. Just really want to kind of crumble that up, throw the tape away, and move on to Pittsburgh. So that's what the Raiders are doing as they're practicing today. So depending on what time you're listening to us, practice may be over or practice maybe hasn't even started yet. But the Raiders are looking all the way forward, and that's what we have to do as well. But I thought that was some really good breakdowns from Lincoln Kennedy. Coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll get to that after I tell you about Prize Picks. And you might be asking right now, what is Prize Picks, Q? Well, it's only the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. That's all. The easiest and the most exciting way to play DFS, right? It's just you against the numbers. You don't have to battle against players, pros, sharks, none of that. All you got to do is pick more or less. Simple. 2 to 6 players, stat projections. You go against that, and you watch the winnings roll in. Again, it is super simple. From people that play the game, they say Prize Picks is the most fun they've had. They can earn up to 25 times their money this football season. All you got to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less their projected stats, and place your entry. That simple. Test your skills on Prize Picks this football season. It's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps, just like that. And it's real simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Right now, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for our first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Code LockedOnNFL for our first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy, sports made easy. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with Jacob in Hanford. He's calling to speak on the press conference he heard with Josh McDaniels, and in particular, the question about the ball being thrown deep by Jimmy G. Here he is, Jacob in Hanford.
What's up, Q? This is Jacob from Hanford, California. You might be familiar with that because it's just a little bit away from Fresno. I just wanted to call specifically today. I was listening to the press conference with Josh McDaniels, and the question got brought up with Jimmy G not really being able to throw it deep, and there was some concern that maybe that's why our running game was so bad, because they stuffed the box. They got 7 guys up there and we only got 5 linemen. So we can't block everybody unless they respect the pass. But when they asked that, I feel like Josh was really dismissive of the question, almost like he was offended. And so I'm wondering am I alone in that? Did any of you guys maybe think that? Do you think that maybe he took it personally, that maybe they were taking a jab at Jimmy G or something? I'm curious as to what you might think about that. Anyways, again, bro, I really appreciate all your work. Professional, clean, loving the content, man. You keep it up. God bless you, too.
Thank you for the call. And yeah, man, I remember that question and Coach McDaniels' response. And you're right. He, wasn't super happy with that question, and you could tell he was kind of short with his answer, but he let it be known. No, there's no question, no worries about Jimmy G throwing the ball deep, and he doesn't feel like that's the reason why the run game can't get going. But you know what? To be honest, it's a fair question until they prove that they can do it, right? I know they've taken a couple shots. It hasn't connected yet, but until they can show that they can do it and be a threat, I do believe that there's something to it. I do believe that teams are going to say, all right, prove it to me. Right? If they don't think you can hit a 3-pointer in basketball, what do? They'll leave you open on the 3-point line. If they don't think you can connect deep, then they'll let you try to connect deep, because they're not going to, they don't think that you can do it. So they're going to try to take away what you can do. So it makes sense And he might have been a little irritated, but until he could prove, and I don't mean him particularly, until the team could prove that they can connect to some of those deep shots, I think there's going to be questions there. So that's fair. Jacob, thanks so much for that call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Salty Raider in the 707. He says, hey, Q, Salty Raider in the 707. So far, through 2 games, Raiders have 0 turnovers. All training camp, I heard about how the defense was focusing on forcing the turnovers. So far, nothing. No doubt it correlates with lack of pass rush, which leads to strip sacks and interception. How is it possible to be so bad year after year at forcing turnovers? Hopes it gets turned around quick, fast, and in a hurry. Appreciate you. That Salty Raider in the 707. And thank you so much for that text. And, yeah, man, I was the one that was leading the charge. Hey, man, the Raiders are forcing turnovers, or they're trying to force turnovers. They have in training camp. They are in preseason. And I'll say this. They should have 2 on the season, but they don't because they've had penalties. Right, they had a hands to the face mask with Nate Hobbs in this game against Buffalo, and then they had a legal contact penalty against Marcus Peters week 1 against the Broncos, where they recovered a fumble. So that would have been 2 turnovers, but instead they have none, and that just goes back to show you that you can't do some of the things right. You've got to do all the things right. You can go get the ball, you can go create the turnover, but if you get penalties, it doesn't matter. So you've got to play clean football as well. But, yeah, I mean, you're right. The lack of the pass rush is definitely a problem, and they've got Max Crosby. Who else is going to step up? Especially when Buffalo did what they did on Sunday where they took Max out of the game and would not let him wreck it. Somebody else has got to be able to step up and be the man, right? Or a couple of these guys step up and be the man. They didn't see it on Sunday. What's going to happen this upcoming week? I'll tell you what, ball security is going to be a major, major detail for the Raiders. Not against the Steelers, but for the Raiders. They're going to have to make sure they find a way to hold on to the ball because the Steelers, they go looking for the ball. They go hunting. Like the Raiders should be doing, that's what the Steelers do. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Jay Ortiz. He's calling to talk about the overall reaction from a lot of Raider Nation when it comes to the loss to Buffalo, bringing up Carr, complaining about Jimmy G, fire Coach McDaniels, and a whole lot more. This is Jay Ortiz calling from Turlock, California.
Yo, what up, Q? This is Jay Ortiz out of Turlock, California. You know, I'm calling because I see a lot of fans, man, and they're ready to throw the towel in. You know, everybody keeps bringing up Carr. Everybody keeps bringing up Garoppolo. Keeps bringing up the way Josh is calling plays, and I understand all that. But at the same time, you know, I'm over this. Let's fire the coach. You know, let's get this right, man. I'm tired of everybody trying to just start over and start over and start over and start over. I was a sophomore when we lost to the Bucks, and I'm 38 now, so, you know, it's been a while, man. And, you know, I think we're a really good team. I just think that we just need to put it together because there's so much talent on this squad, man. But I appreciate everything you do, Q. I listen to you every morning when I drive to Livermore. So keep it going, and let's see. Hopefully we get this big win off the Steelers and keep this ball rolling. And, hey, man, we're still 1-1. We're at the top of the division still. We got division wins. So everybody just chill out. Let's go Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, yeah, I mean, that's what's going to happen when there's a bad loss, right? Especially when you feel like, hey, you know what? This team has an opportunity to go into Buffalo and make a statement. I felt like they had an opportunity to keep the game close and maybe steal it. I sure didn't think they were going to get blown out 38-10. That was a surprise to me. I was sitting there on the couch watching like, dang. Well, dang, right? Like, that's really bad. But, again, it's only week 2. That's the beautiful thing about it. At the end of the day, they are tied for first place. They are the only team in the AFC West that has a division win. So there's that, right? If you look at the schedule, well, and you look at the Chargers, they're 0-2, and they're kind of discombobulated. The Broncos, we know they're discombobulated. And the Chiefs, their offense isn't that good right now. Right now, they're being led by their defense. So, again, it's only 2 weeks in. I think you still have to give it a couple weeks before you realize who these teams are. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of the reaction that you're hearing on the podcast, you're seeing on Twitter, you're hearing on the radio station is just frustrated fans that are like, man, every time I think that this team could be good, then all of a sudden they go and lay an egg like they did on Sunday against Buffalo. But thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Just got time for a couple more. This text is from Slickback Raider. He said, what's up, Q? Happy birthday to your son. I'm only a couple weeks older than him. Every time I hear the passing of a young person, I think about myself and what I was doing at that age. At 20 years old, I was going through growing pains on how to be an adult and trying to figure out life. Hopefully the Raiders can get this win on Sunday for many reasons, and hopefully the loss against the Bills was the rock bottom to the season. Also, tell the Locked On Steelers host that there's only one nation. That's Slickback Raider. Thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. And it's funny that you bring up Christopher Carter. He'll be on tomorrow's show. Right? We've got the crossover edition. It'll already be Thursday. That's wild, right? The week is already almost over. It's almost time for another game, which is going to be great. Get that taste of that Bills game out of your mouth. So, yeah, we'll be talking to Chris Carter on tomorrow's show for the crossover edition as the Steelers are 1-1 and the Raiders are 1-1 heading into this game at Allegiant Stadium, the season home opener. And, yeah, as far as, thank you, first of all, for the happy birthday to my son. Definitely appreciate that. But that's, when he passed away, I'm glad you brought up that point of what you were doing at 20 years old. When he passed away, that was one of the things that went through my mind. I'm not going to lie. I thought about, man, at 20, what was I doing? Right? At 20 years old, what was I doing? And why was I so lucky? How come everything that, I did and crazy stuff that we might have done as kids, how come that never came back and bit me like it bit him? And then you just kind of realize how blessed you are and how lucky you are to, have survived some of the things. And, simple things like a car accident, right? Anybody can get in a car accident, especially at that age. It's crazy, but yeah, that's one of the things that I thought about as well, and I think about all the time as well. But thanks so much for the messages and the kind words, man. I definitely appreciate you, and like I said at the top, man, the family does as well. Let's see, one more call. Raider Rich in the 831. He's calling to talk about head coach Josh McDaniels. Also talks about Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel and kind of compares and contrasts the two. Here he is, Raider Rich in the 831.
Thank you, Raider Rich, man, 831. Hey, this is your outtake or your takes on North Turner. Josh McDaniels in his press conference. He kind of reminds me of North Turner in a way, and Monty Kiffin, who are great coordinators, but just not head coaches. I wanted to get your take on it because I know a lot of people harp on Mike McDaniel and his press conference, how he's a little kind of awkward. But watching him Sunday night, I mean, he felt like he has some social skills. And his team actually wants to play for him. And so I dug a little deeper, and I noticed McDaniels in his fourth season, he's got 18 wins in 4 seasons as a head coach, or his 4th season. Mike McDaniels already has 10. He's barely into his 2nd season. And the reason I'm comparing the two is because they're both, in my opinion, like offensive gurus. Granted, McDaniels has a lot more, Josh McDaniels has a lot more, let's just say, hardware in terms of his Super Bowls and whatnot. But he totally reminds me of North Turner. Just kind of like a great coordinator, but maybe a mediocre head coach. And I noticed in his press conference, with your takes there, I feel like at a press conference, the coach is either talking to his fans or the team. He's not really answering your questions. That's just the way I've always taken it. And he seems so not personable. And maybe that's just my opinion, and I really don't know, because I'm not there. You've watched training camp, you've watched in season. I want to get your take, Q. Go Raiders, ain't giving up. Just wanted to hear your take on this, man. That was my observation. Take care.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And it's a fair question. And that's all I ever ask, right? If you're going to criticize the coach, just be fair. And I think that saying, is he a good head coach or is he just a good coordinator, is fair. Because so far, what we know about Coach Josh McDaniels is he's a really good offensive coordinator. You mentioned the hardware. He has the hardware to prove that. He has not proven he's a really good head coach. And I think that that's something that he has to prove. He has to show. I can't say it. Nobody else can say it. Nobody can vouch for him. He's got to go out there and show he could be a really good head coach, a really good leader of men. Somehow, Coach McDaniel in Miami, he's figured it out. He's got it. He's got those guys playing really well. He's kind of a quirky dude, and that's okay. I say that with all due respect. He's got them, locked in and playing really well, and they got a really good offensive scheme. They got a lot of weapons. They got a lot of speed. And shout out to Alec Ingold, man. I'm happy for him. He leads the Raiders. He's in Miami, and he's thriving there as well. So I think Miami is a really dangerous team. I think they're a legit team, even though I said you won't know a lot about these teams till 3 or 4 weeks in. I think we can pretty confidently say Miami's going to be a really good team. But I will say, as far as just the person who Josh McDaniels is, he's a cool dude. He comes into the media room. He's always, joking and smiling. And he wasn't that way on Monday because, coming off that loss to Buffalo, who's going to be smiling and joking? But he's always been real personable to me. We've had conversations. I've had conversations with GM Dave Ziegler. He's probably even more personable, more charismatic, but Josh McDaniels is cool. He's really a cooler dude than I thought he was going to be. I just had no idea. Just knew he was coming from that Belichick tree and expected to get, just here because, it's just we're going to go out there and try to win this game this week. Got Pittsburgh coming to town, and we're going to go out there and we're going to put our best foot forward, and our quarterback's going to be fine. Our running game's going to be okay. Our defense is looking good. Yeah, we're working really hard to that. I thought it was going to be a lot of, Belichick speak, but no, he's been cool. But again, he's got to go out there and prove that he could be a cool head coach, right, and get it done as a head coach as opposed to just getting it done as a coordinator. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. And that's honestly all the time I got for on today's show. Really went a little bit over. Still got a text from Omar in El Paso. Kels from Portland, Oregon. Got a call from him. Want to get that on the show, plus more, right? And then, of course, news and notes of the day. We'll have plenty of conversation. Tomorrow will be the Locked On crossover edition when we have the Pittsburgh Steelers host, Christopher Carter, and myself. We'll be comparing and contrasting the teams and talk about storylines, key matchups, maybe some path to victory, maybe predictions. I'm not big on predictions, but we'll be talking about a lot on this show as we all prepare for this upcoming game coming up on Sunday at Allegiant Stadium, the season home opener, the Steelers and the Raiders. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.